Hi, everybody. It's Unpopular Front. I'm Benny Yudishin. Hello. I would like to today talk a little bit about the rising progressive liberal queen, Elizabeth Warren. I just not mean to be offensive. It's just she is rising and she's trying to be the queen of America. It's basically what the president is, right? Trump is basically the king, right? It's pretty much the same. I know it's not. I get it. I'm kidding. We fought a war. But there's a pretty obvious like conflation and smear and sort of rat fucking going on with a story dealing with Miss Warren and Senator Warren. Sorry, folks. Queen Warren. I promise I'm not going to be mean to her. I promise. About a from in sort of right wing media, basically trying to sort of throw up the issue of I think trying to sort of go on the hot shit that is her weird 23andMe thing, which was not a good idea, but I'm not going to hold it against her unless Native folks tell me to, and then I will. I'm going to be honest. But it's around a pretty important part of the Elizabeth Warren narrative and sort of in her life and when she started as a teacher. And she thinks she had not finished, or she had just finished her bachelor's degree and still needed to get like a teaching certificate. And she got pregnant. Now, this was pretty far back. I don't know if you guys know this. I know we love to talk about how old how old Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are, which is true. Elizabeth Warren's also pretty old. So this was, probably almost 50 years ago. And she was pregnant. And the part of the narrative that really hasn't ever really been questioned until now was this aspect and this story that as she began to be visibly pregnant, she was shown the door. And, there was an article put out, questioning that. And I think that's wrong. I think it's also just like, I don't think it's very believable to me that that wouldn't have happened, right? That's a very common thing that I've heard from women for many, 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 many decades. I think it's even a part that's sort of an internalized, idea of patriarchy and, the misogyny and all these aspects that says that if a woman is pregnant, like she should be at home with, taking care of the baby and being very protective of the baby, because like a deep idea in our society, no doubt is, and it's a thing that I think, centuries of feminists and proto-feminists and socialists and radicals and radical Democrats or whatever you want to call them have pushed against. But it's a deep thing in sort of the psyche of Western society and Western civilization, all throughout the world, that women are supposed to be just, what did Ken Bone call them? Beautiful submarines, something like that. But really, that they're supposed to be holders of the future, right? And that in that there's a sort of patriarchal kind of idea that, patting them on the head, you need to be very safe and protect that. And actually, that's the reason why we're actually helping you by saying you probably shouldn't be working right now, so we're gonna fire you. Those are very real trends and histories, and things are maybe a little different now. But I think that we would be foolish to think that just because we have a few laws or a few plans, that those are going to go away, right? And there was a story that came out that sort of looked to kind of, I think, throw a little bit of sand on this and kind of rattle some people. And, it's a classic rat fuck. You kind of just throw it out there. Do you beat your wife? No, I don't beat my wife. Oh, so you say, or no, when did you stop beating your wife? I got it all wrong again. Regardless. But to me, it's an obvious sort of just bullshit fever swamp right-wing media thing, right? And I think that's like, you should throw that out. Obviously, that's bullshit, Even though I'm a Bernie supporter, I also really believe in things like family leave and protections for pregnant people, because I'm a nanny and I need people to get pregnant and have babies so I can help take care of them. Like, I am materially invested in this, like, changing and parenthood in general being respected more, beyond the sort of like, oh, you're so wonderful because you're a parent. I think it needs to be more materially supported. And through that, we can actually, I think, break down a lot of issues and things that build these sort of forms of oppression that are constantly holding back people of all different kinds and types. And that this is kind of a place where class politics, I think, could radically change the way gender politics works. Because of these sort of reforms and this kind of liberation that I think some real material support would give. So I want to put all that out in the front. Obviously, I in general think, Elizabeth Warren is a good liberal. I don't think she's a socialist. I don't think she's a social democrat. That's fine. She's a good liberal. And I think that there are absolutely places to critique her on, as I have on this channel and this podcast. But this probably isn't it, to say that she lied about this story. Maybe some details weren't exactly right in her sort of political narrative, but honestly, in what sort of politician narrative is it always perfectly, synced up and tight? It's just not normally how that's going to happen. And I saw some reactions to this from Warren supporters, though, that I think is showing me that some of them have kind of been, they've been coasting, let's say. I think the rise of Elizabeth Warren in this presidential primary is a result of many, 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 many factors. But I do think one of them has been the fact that she, as I spoke about in a previous video, as Naomi Klein says, she's kind of identity politics for journalists to a degree. And for a certain class of people, Warren just speaks to them. She is them in a lot of ways, She's very smart. She's very good at doing the thing you're supposed to do within the rules and bending it within the system, which is a skill and a talent we're going to need in the future. So that's why I'm not saying we should throw her in the trash and, burn her, and anyone who votes for Warren is just a bourgeois pig. Although I do see people who say that about voting for any Democrat. So if that's your perspective, cool. But the reaction I saw from this is showing to me, though, that I think some Warren people have just been coasting on easy media coverage. Because, let's be honest, if she's the nominee, she's going to get so much of this sort of bullshit rat fuckery thrown at you. You just wait. You just wait to see what they're going to come up with her. And some of these responses I've seen to this have basically attempted to turn it into that it's like Jacobin Magazine's fault because they're like critical of Warren, or that it's like, people are turning against a, pregnant woman who lost her job to shove it to the professional managerial class. You know who I'm talking about, Mr. Adkins. I see you. And I think that's I think showing that some of these folks aren't quite ready for what's going to happen. Because it's undeniable to me that for someone who supposedly is just as progressive as Bernie, they're just the same. She's just more practical and more detailed. That she doesn't have, and her supporters don't have the narrative, I think, and the organization. And I just think sort of the psychological ability at the moment or strategy to get ready for what would happen if she was the nominee. I'm comparing this specifically to Bernie for obvious reasons, since they are always put up as the two stalwart progressives, and the cliche has been, oh, but they're so similar, you know, like, you know, they're all working for the same thing. Why are these Bernie people being critical of Warren, not noting when Warren people are critical of Bernie? Whatever, it's fine. But Bernie people and the far left in electoral politics, which I realize is like the center in like world politics, especially in like countries with actual social democracy, or at least a history of it, has basically been the constant drumbeat against Bernie Sanders in media, in many places of commentary, from people with high levels in academia, and through against Bernie through some organizations like the Working Families Party. You know, there was the whole controversy about them endorsing Warren, and I think the response to this story is showing that it's time for the Warren people, if they're going to be serious and if they want her to win, that they cannot rest on the laurels of mainstream opinion carrying them their way. You know, you cannot, if you're a Warren supporter, I swear, do not make the same mistakes that you made with Hillary Clinton. Do not just, you know, base sort of all of your worldview based on, you know, feeling victimized by the fact that a right wing exists, or victimized by the fact that a left wing critic exists. And not just sort of, you know, just hope that the institutions that we're all just supposed to trust and are supposed to kind of be the stewards of politics, to support her and to, you know, work more with it, you know, sort of for the side of truth versus the actual incentives of profit and of controversy. So you got to be tougher than making this into like feeling victimized by the fact that some right-wing wacko made up some bullshit. And if seeing the response to this from Warren people makes me worried. It makes me worried not because I think their politics are terrible. It makes me worried because it's reminding me that the progressive movement, as we talk about it in like the past, let's say 20, 30 years, is not as tough as I think it needs to be. The progressive movement can't just throw facts and statistics. It needs a better narrative. It needs to like follow through with a narrative. And the problem I've had with the 2020 Warren, not with Warren throughout her career, I'm speaking like basically about the problem I've had with Warren ever since she sort of dipped to her lowest in the polling and then has come out to be basically in the top three, sometimes the very top, and that she appeals to a lot of different kinds of people in the Democratic Party, which is great, right? You want that. Is that my issue with 2020 Warren has been that many of the roots for her to get the nomination, and this is partially, you could say, because Bernie exists on her left flank, means that she is going to have to, I think, sort of try to fit within a sort of new center left within the Democratic Party. It's really not new. It's like the oldest part of the party as it stands right now. And in that, she's going to have to make a compromise with many forces within that party that they themselves need to be targeted. This is kind of why it's not just that she doesn't call herself a socialist and Bernie does, and that's why I support Bernie. It's the label stuff is kind of bullshit. And even honestly, the fact, and I think I even made a comment about this, and I kind of want to disregard it, because like even the fact that she was a Republican for a long time is not a huge deal to me. What I'm more interested in is the fact that we need to have someone who is looking to be confrontational and have a narrative about not just how the country has failed because of corruption or because of greed. Because the thing is, when you make these kinds of issues about just corruption or about just sort of generalized feelings of greed, what we're getting a feeling of these are sort of emotional, psychological issues, right? And when you make it like that, honestly, it seems impossible because greed and corruption have been issues in the concept of politics since before Aristotle wrote his book about politics, where we get a lot of this terminology that we're still trying to use today, But if you talk about things like very specific people who do very specific things, and perhaps very specific people who want to have very specific policies, you can actually have a narrative that actually makes sense. And as shitty as it is to like basically just say a bunch of bullshit about how Elizabeth Warren lied about getting fired, which I don't think is true. And also in general, I think if you're a left winger, we pretty much, especially if you're dealing with something so long ago in the past, like, yeah, we want to support things like workers' rights, and part of workers' rights is stuff like family leave. But if you're already feeling if you're a Warren supporter and you're already feeling victimized by this kind of shit, you got, oh my God, just get ready for the pile, just like cloudy with the chance of shit balls are just going to be flying on you. So we got to get tougher. You got to get tougher. I'm still holding out for the big guy, Bernie. But like, this is something, I would definitely support Warren in the general. And if the main reaction from her media surrogates is, oh my God, how dare you? How dare you? Without like a structural critique, it's not good enough. And you're going to lose if you do that. So you gotta have that class war narrative to sort of create the greater context. I didn't see Warren people saying, this is a reason why we really need to have like greater family leave policies. And like, yeah, some people turn this about sexism, and that's true. But the thing is, the sexism narrative can be used in an elite context as well. So you have to sort of meld that with sort of the working class context and the, oppression that women who predominantly make up the working class face around things like reproduction. And if we can't do that, if that can't happen, then this is just, number 5 million of how liberalism can't confront its own contradictions.